That's going. Yes, let me open the slides. We'll share the screen and we'll get started. Can you see that okay?
Half of it, it's, there it goes. You want to go to full screen?
Yep, there we go. Okay, now it should be good. Can everybody see?
Yep, it's perfect.
Great.
Well, Paul, thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be with you. I'm, it's interesting. I'm speaking to people all over the world right now and have been for the last 20 years regarding climate change. And I got kind of hooked into it when I was chair of the National Research Council's transportation committees and our board. And at the end of that tenure, they give the retiring chair a study. They give them enough money to do a study of their choice. And so I got $100,000 to do a study, and I decided to do a study on combating climate change through sustainable transportation policies. And they didn't want me to do that study because they were getting a lot of money from the automobile industry. But I insisted and got the study done, and it proved that we were causing the climate change crisis by really primarily driving too much in petroleum powered cars and using too much carbon based energy. And that really got me shifted over from a lifetime of promoting mass transportation to instead really focusing on climate change. And I've concluded that it was the right thing to do now because we found that climate change is indeed the next big trial for mammals on Earth. Now, before I go on into the presentation, I should mention that I'm past president of the Downtown San Jose Club, and it's big, 450 members, 50 committees working in the community. And one of those committees today was doing the cleanup of the Guadalupe River Creek in the downtown area. There were 1,000 people living in the creek in tents and so on. And we raised the money to house those people for the next 6 months in motel rooms and so on. And then went in and cleaned up all of their mess during the last couple of days. That was the most ugly job I have ever done, let me tell you. It was absolutely vulgar, both in terms of having to see the way they lived, but also the stuff they left. So I just got back in time to pitch in to this gathering, and I much prefer talking to smaller groups than the big groups because you can really share time more with the smaller groups. And I already hear from you talking to each other that you're smarties. So I'll look forward to some questions at the end that will put me on the spot if you can. So let's look forward to that. Now, Paul, if we could go to the first slide. Science, by the way, all of what you're going to see today is science. It isn't pseudoscience. It's done by scientists who have been peer reviewed by other independent scientists. So everything you're going to see is what's called double peer reviewed. The research was peer reviewed by independent science. The publications were peer reviewed by independent editorial boards. So it's factual. And the reference information will be at the end of the document if you want to follow up and see about the factuality involved. But what you see there is something out of the National Geographic, and it tells you that we've had 5 extinctions in the history of the world that our geologists have been able to reconstruct back 444 million years ago. And the last one was 66 million years ago when the big comet hit off the coast of Mexico. And that killed all the dinosaurs and most other life on Earth. Well, science is telling us that we are now bumping up against the 6th extinction. That if we don't change the way we're living, the way we use energy, we don't get off of carbon as the primary energy source within the next 10, 12 years, it will be too late. And we'll discuss that now in this presentation. Next, please. Climate change is caused by humans. It's here. Some of the impacts are already irreversible. The fires, the droughts. If you look at the equatorial area around the globe, it is completely desertified all the way around the globe. And the people that were living in those areas are moving to the south and to the north in order to reach water. That's what's piled up against the fence at the southern border of the United States. Those are the folks that are risking their lives to go across the Mediterranean to get into Europe. Well, right now we're talking about regulations and fences and so on to keep out the hundreds of thousands of people, when in a short time there are going to be hundreds of millions of people coming across those borders, and they're not going to be kept out. We won't be able to. So we better figure out a way to accommodate them, first of all, and secondly, to reverse this trend so that it doesn't become devastating to the world. Next, please. 99.9% of the scientists on Earth, according to the Washington Post, indicate that what we're seeing today is true. 11,000 scientists, independent scientists, most of the Nobel laureates, have declared climate change to be a state of emergency. And they're asking the world's governments to do so also. And that's in the other parts of the globe, that's happening. Most of the European governments have declared climate change to be a state of emergency. United Nations have declared that. We're gradually seeing that happen in the United States. United States is the last one. We're the worst polluters in the world by far, 4 times as much pollution per person as China. And that's because we've been under the thumb of the petroleum industry for all these years. Automobiles are the way we have to go. Well, if we're going to drive automobiles in the future, they got to be electrically powered. Next, please. This is climate change. The heat from the sun comes to the earth. In the past, most of it is bounced off the earth and gone back out into the universe. But a thickening blanket of gases, primarily CO2, around the earth is capturing that heat and it's bouncing back to earth instead of bouncing out into the universe. That boomerang effect of the heat is cooking our planet. It's becoming more and more fierce and increasing more and more rapidly as more and more CO2 is created on the planet. And we're in trouble. Let me give you an analogy. If you were to go into your garage and take your petroleum-powered car and start it off, and then gradually close the door on that garage, you're going to die. Well, that's what we're doing to our planet. The heat from the sun is coming to the earth. It's bouncing off of that CO2 blanket, which is getting thicker and thicker and thicker as we create much more CO2 now than the planet can clean up. And we're cooking the earth. Next, please. That's a quote that you can use if you go out into the community. We won't go into it. Next, please. This is important. This was on the front page of the New York Times, double peer reviewed. It's research done by Russia, the United Nations, China, and the United States on ice corings in the 5-mile thick ice sheet in Antarctica. And they analyzed the teeny little bubbles in the ice going back 800,000 years and found those peaks and hollows. Those are ice ages and warming periods all across the history of the globe until the red arrow. That red arrow is now, and it isn't a peak and hollow. It's going straight up, and it's continuing to go straight up. And that's why we're all so very, very concerned. It's 4 times as high as the hottest period and the highest concentrations of CO2 in the globe's history back 800,000 years. It's twice as high as the highest point, 4 times as high as the average. We got to look at that. That's science. The other way, please. Thanks, Paul. Next, please. So we've got CO2 in the atmosphere rapidly increasing. What's it causing in terms of heat on Earth? And here's a study done, published in the New York Times by a whole group of Nobel laureates. And it shows the heat on Earth. The last 6 years have been the hottest 6 years in the recorded history of Earth. Last year was the hottest year, tied with 2016 as the hottest year in the history. And of course, we have now wildfires and terrible inclement weather. The reason why the weather is inclement is because the oceans are heating up. You have more water evaporating from the oceans, going up into the atmosphere, having more pressure behind it. So they come storming into the land as hurricanes and typhoons. And then they dump huge deluges onto the earth. But because it's not warm, not cold anymore, it runs right off. And that runs right back into the ocean, which is salt, which means we don't have fresh water to work with on Earth. And that's what's happening in terms of the desertification. Next, please. So we have CO2, we have heat. Where's it coming from? Where's that CO2 coming from? This is a study done by the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration in cooperation with UC Berkeley, Lawrence Livermore Labs, Scripps, and so on. Many Nobel laureates involved. And they found that it's coming from transportation, 38%. Industry we can't reach. Government has to control industry, but we can control the electric energy that we're using and importing. The other uses, agriculture, residential, and so on, those are pretty small. We ought to work. We ought to work on them and be worried about them. But if we don't control that top group, then we're out of business. So the concentration of the Rotary Climate Action Committee and the Rotary Club of San Jose now, and the Rotary Climate Action Council for the West Coast, and the Environmental Sustainability Rotary Action Group for Rotary International is concentrating on that top group, transportation and electric energy generation. That's 62% of the pollution. Now, next, please. Thanks, Paul. So it's coming from transportation. Where? Cars are terrible. Nearly 200 parts per million per seat kilometer. Air is as bad as cars. Short-hop airlines, which can be replaced by high-speed rail and is replaced by high-speed rail around the world, are worse than cars in terms of pollution per seat mile, with going up, climbing up into the atmosphere, being only at good cruising temperatures for a short time, and then having to come down with those big engines. Buses, not so good. Fortunately, we're replacing our buses with hybrid and electric buses, thanks to VTA and some of the other progressive transit agencies. But the real solution is steel wheel rail in our transportation systems. These are in use now around the world. China has created 12,000 miles, 12,000 kilometers of high-speed rail in 30 years, starting from scratch. They're going to convert their whole transportation system, over 120,000 miles of rail, to electrically powered, because they're really trying to fight the climate change issue. We're not so good. So we've got to catch up with high-speed rail, light rail, commuter rail, metro rail, and electric buses, and we need to be driving electric cars. Next, please. What's happening? Well, I've already mentioned that we're causing desertification. People are migrating away from those areas because they're starving, and we're going to have to accommodate those folks in our area. We can't keep them out with any kind of a barrier or any kind of laws. Human kindness says we're going to have to accommodate those folks. So we've got to either accommodate them or make it so that they can live in their own areas. And that means we've got to reverse the way we're using energy. Huge epidemics. I'm not going to go into detail there, but they're all sorts, everything from Ebola to our COVID mess. Water shortages, and we talked about that. Radically inclement weather, wildfires. Like, we're going to go into a drought period now that is unprecedented ever. And most of California will burn. And we've got to be aware of that. And the only way we can really fight it is to be able to create better weather patterns. Polar ice caps are North Pole is going to melt. We can't protect it. The South Pole, God help us if the South Pole with 5 miles thick ice cap melts, because that will mean 200 feet higher sea level. Well, in downtown San Jose, we're 50 feet above sea level, and we're going to be underwater. Where are you going to be there at the end of the ridge in Fremont? Think about that. So we've got to figure out a way to stop this just rampant climate change. Next, please. This is the key point. The Secretary General of the United Nations, Secretary Guterres, has been telling us since 2018 that climate change was out of control. It's occurring much faster than we thought. The study was done by 72 Nobel laureates working in a climate change commission under the umbrella of the United Nations. They have concluded that at that time we had about 12 years before what we call the point of no return, the point after which nothing we can do is going to avoid the disaster of climate change. And 2 years have passed. And in America, we wasted those 2 years with a government that didn't care about climate change, didn't believe science. Now we've got a chance with a new government that is believing in science, but we better pay attention. We have something in the neighborhood of 10 years left. And if we don't make most of these changes in that period of time, next, please. This is what the future looks like. The green line is where we are now. If we make the changes now, it's still going to be uncomfortably warm on the earth, but it's going to be survivable. And if we make those changes now, if we don't, we're on the red line, and the red line is the line to oblivion. That's the line that takes us to a point very quickly that Earth is no longer livable by mammals. Now, this is science, folks. I'd ask you, please, to check anything that you don't believe might be accurate, because it is accurate. It's coming directly from the scientific community. And it scares the hell out of me, because I have 4 beautiful grandbabies that don't deserve this kind of a world to receive from us. Next, please. This is an old friend of mine, Hal Harvey, up in Palo Alto. He's a scientist working on energy, and he has the way forward to us in the next slide. Next. He says, transform the power grid totally, immediately, to all electric. Everything has to be electrified, and the electricity must be created by sustainable sources. Transportation, most importantly, because that's the biggest contributor. Let me describe what's causing climate change. We have 30 million, more than 30 million petroleum-powered that are lit off virtually every morning when we get past COVID, lit off every morning. They take us 5 to 200 miles to work. In the evening, we light them off again and return home. And while we're away, the guy with the lawnmower and the leaf blower and other kinds of devices comes by the house. By the way, a lawnmower creates more pollution than your car, a gas-powered lawnmower. So that's what's causing the crisis. And we can't say, oh, we'll do something less. We have to stop it. Now, let me go on one more point. I'm an old retired politician, old especially, but retired politician. Honest politicians don't retire rich. I'm living on a relatively modest pension. But with that pension and with the government subsidies that everybody can have, we've put 32 solar panels on our roof and now have just squeezed and saved to get our second Tesla. And we're completely off the grid, both in terms of the way we travel and the energy we use to maintain our daily activities. If I can do that, you can do it. And let me tell you, if you don't do it, you're damn fools, because the cars will pay for themselves in 10 years. There's no maintenance. They don't have any pistons and oil change and those kinds of things, just little electric motors that go around. And they're reduced, so it reduced energy cost. It costs about 30% for your electricity, if you're buying electricity, of what you would be paying in terms of petroleum costs. And your registration fees and your insurance are also reduced because they're electrics. So it pays for themselves. The same thing with the solar panels. Our solar panels paid for themselves in 7 years. So we all can do it. And if we do it, each one of us, then we'll make it. We'll make it in the 10-year deadline. Next, please. So here's the transportation solutions, and I've already mentioned them all, so I'm going to skim through the various kinds of steel wheel and rail electrically powered systems, electric buses, cars, bikes, and walking. You know, walking is good for you. It'll save your heart. Next, please. With our homes, the solar panels I've mentioned, the battery walls that are coming out now will make you completely independent from PG&E when they want to turn off your electricity for a couple of days. And you can do both of those and get huge tax credits to be from both the state and federal government and from the Air Quality Management District Board regionally. You can get tax credits that will cover a major portion of those costs. Or if you can't do that, then make sure that when you buy electricity, you specify that they'll only be from sustainably generated electrical aggregators. Those are available now in every town, and you can just specify that it's sustainably generated electricity. Insulate your home. Get rid of the gas heaters and fireplaces and wood burning. We can all do that, and we have done that here. We have a beautiful fireplace, which is now for potted plants. And so we can do it. Next, please. And this is what we're doing with the Rotary clubs that are creating their climate action committees. We're becoming climate ambassadors. You see this button here? I wear it everywhere. And the members of our 35-member climate action committee and the leaders of our 15 clubs in the district who have created climate action programs wear these buttons to stimulate conversation. Over the blue side over here was only 60 years ago when the earth was still cool. The red is now where we're cooking the earth. And when someone sees that and asks you about it, you can tell them, and it helps them to understand that they've got to be involved in this too. It has to be each one of us. Speak to your favorite groups, girls clubs, boys clubs, your home and school clubs, your environmental groups, and so on. Buy or lease an electric car. If it's time to get a new car, get an electric car. It'll save you the whole price of that car in a 10-year lifespan. Install solar on your home. That pays itself off in even a shorter period of time than 10 years. So, and you get all kinds of tax credits. So, and if you can't do those things, then the only thing you have left is to pray for our children. Next, please. Now, this is what's happening in the Bay Area to give you an idea that we've planned ahead. We knew it was happening. I brought the information home and was chair of the transportation board for 25 years here in Santa Clara County. So we're doing it right if we can get enough funding to build it. Next. That's the commuter rail programs. You have Caltrain on the left, you have Capital Train and the Altamont Express on the right. Those go right through your area. And those are all being gradually converted to all electric systems like Europe. Next, please. BART, Great system, just very expensive and very expensive to build and operate. Next. It's now built down to Berryessa in West San Jose, in East San Jose, and is under construction from there through San Jose and to Santa Clara. Next. Light rail, that's next. That's the green lines are built in San Jose now. These are like European light rail systems. And next, please. These lines are under construction or in final study, and then they'll have a final loop around the west side of the valley, creating the commute loop and spoke system that was originally planned. Next, we'll pull the buses back from their current route systems to instead become collectors in the neighborhoods, bringing people over to the nearest train station so they can take the faster, more efficient rail systems to their destinations. Next. The high-speed train through the middle of it. The high-speed rail system is just about done from Fresno to Bakersfield. It's under construction from Fresno to Merced and through Bakersfield. And then the next route is through the Altamont Pass, pardon me, not Altamont Pass, through the Pacheco Pass, under the Pacheco Pass from Chowchilla, Fresno area to Gilroy and into the Caltrain system, coming up through the Caltrain system through San Jose and San Francisco. Now the Caltrain system is all prepared. They're changing over to electric power now, and they'll be all prepared to handle the high-speed trains when the high-speed trains arrive in Gilroy. Next, please. Next. Okay, you can see the Diridon station and the Mineta Airport. Those will be interconnected with the people mover system, automated guideway system, that will allow a person to come from Fresno, 51 minutes, high-speed rail, 220 miles an hour, arriving in San Jose. You hop off the train and get onto the people mover, automated guideway transit system, and you're at the international airport, ready to take your flight to Stuttgart or to Tokyo with no impedance in between. And so it becomes a true international experience. By the way, Norm Mineta and I fight over whether it's better to have your train station or your airport named after you. He and I will never agree on that fight, by the way. Next, please. That's the reference information. You're welcome to use any of that to follow up on anything that I've said to make sure that it's factual or to gain additional information if you want that. And then, of course, the last two are where you can get your tax credits, and they'll tell you about your tax credits and how to get your electric cars and your solar panels. Okay, let's go back to the map, Paul. I think it's one back. There, let's stay right there for a minute, and let's take your questions now. I've stressed how important it is to act now, that the platform is all set for us to be successful, especially here in the Bay Area. And the only thing we lack now is funding, but that's coming to us. The new president has created a $2 trillion infrastructure bill, funding that will come primarily from carbon taxes, disincentive fees, they don't call them taxes. And those funds will then be put into programs that will counter climate change. And the one at the top of the list is our high-speed rail system for California. And so these things are going to happen. The BART system, the last couple of $100 million to complete the BART system is on the desk of the new Federal Transit Administrator, who happens to be Nuria Fernandez, by the way, who had been the Transit Agency General Manager for San Jose. So we've got an in there, and you can bet that system is going to be funded quickly. So we're on the right track, pardon the pun, and we just have to stay the course and fight hard for our share of these funds, and there should be adequate to rebuild the United States. Paul, let me stop now. I'm sorry to be so emphatic, but it's really an urgent time. But if any of you have any questions, I'd love to have them.
Paul, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So electrification of the transportation system, are we going to go the nuclear power, or are we still we are doing hydro, or we are doing coal?
Well, let's talk about that, because it's a little dilemma for me. I've always been an environmentalist and always opposed to nuclear power. In the old nuclear power plants that are all being shut down, of course, are not very safe, and that isn't the way to go. But the new nuclear power plants, the ones that are being installed now in France and in China, are safe. They're much smaller, they're much less expensive to build, and they're safer to operate. And the volume of waste is smaller coming out of them. And they're developing devices for re-refining that waste and using it over and over and over again until it's virtually nil. So as an old hardcore environmentalist, I'm beginning to be accepting to new nuclear. At the same time, I realize that we're not going to get a nuclear plant sited and built in California in the next 10 years. The land use laws and the political climate in California is just such that it would never happen in the next 10 years in California, even though China might do it in 5 or 6 or 7 years. In Europe, in France gets over 90% of their electricity from nuclear, by the way. So a lot of the old plants, which are gradually shutting down. So let me concentrate on what really is happening in California. There is and by the way, this is based on the fact that solar panels are becoming much, much more efficient. When I put the panels on our roof 12 years ago, they converted 9% of the solar energy to electricity, only 9%. The solar panels now are converting 20% of the sun's energy to electricity. That's over twice as efficient. And they're becoming more efficient very rapidly because of the research being forced by China. And now America is getting on that competition. We've been put back decades in terms of our energy research by the opposition to the oil companies, by the way. Makes me very unhappy and angry for our babies. But they're gradually getting out of the way. And so the current administration in Sacramento has all kinds of incentives through the Energy Commission to encourage folks to put solar panels on their roofs, to put solar panels on every commercial building, and to retrofit residential and commercial to solar panels. Now, if we put the new efficient solar panels on every commercial building and every roof where sun reaches, we wouldn't have to worry about energy. We'd have more than we needed. We just have to do it broadly. And it's a matter of just getting the job done. Now, it's going to take a while. So we'll have to rely on our hydroelectric. Hydroelectric is providing almost 40% of our electricity now, the great big dams. And they're not going to be reliable for the long term because they'll eventually fill up with silt over 50, 60, another 100 years. So we are going to have to develop alternatives. And we can't build more dams because, oh goodness, the Save the River folks will go crazy, and they're very powerful. So we've got to figure out a way to use those hydroelectric plants, the geothermal and some nuclear in the short term, and shift over to solar and wind generated electricity way off the coast has just been approved by the Biden administration for both the East and West Coast. This would be way out in international waters. You don't see the turbines, and they create, each one of the turbines can create as much as a good sized city will require. So that's the future. And I don't worry at all about the volume of electricity we're needing. What you're hearing there is research from the oil companies saying you should be afraid of this because there isn't enough energy. Well, we haven't had an energy shortage, an electric energy shortage from the volume of energy created for a long time, clear back to the Davis administration. We have an excess of energy now. So we're going to stay up with the demand. It's a matter of us being tough enough to continue to build more and more and to use that demand now with our electric cars and converting to electric transportation. I apologize for my voice. I have only one vocal cord and one lung. When you get old, everything falls apart. So I'm having a little harder time to communicate. It's a dirty thing to have happen to an old politician. Other questions?
I have a question. Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Murad, go ahead.
Does it have to do with dogs?
Quick question about the high-speed rail. I know, is it getting off the ground or what is happening with that? I'm just curious about that project.
Well, and Paul, you've hit a favorite point of mine because I was chair of the California High-Speed Rail Authority through the 1920s. And I went all over the world looking at the other high-speed rail projects. How can 14 different countries in the world have high-speed rail? Some of those countries being poor countries, another 18 countries in the world studying high-speed rail to the point of getting ready to build them. And the United States, the richest country in the world's history, we can't afford it? That's ridiculous. We can't afford it because the oil companies tell us we can't afford it. But we can afford it. We can't not afford it. And so it costs money. It sure does cost money. But once you've got it built, it pays for itself. It's the only transportation system in the world that makes a net profit in operations each year. Japan has 4 high-speed rail lines, and every one of them is profitable. Now, we can do that. And the starter line, which has been under study for so long, it's tripled in price. Remember that if you delay a construction project for a year, it's going to go up 5% because construction costs go up 5% per year just in terms of inflation. If you delay it 10 years, if you delay it 7 years, it doubles in price. That's the way it goes. Now, we've delayed our high-speed rail project for 30 years. And now we're amazed that it's more expensive. Well, if we delay it for longer, it's going to cost more, but it's still necessary. And the project between Bakersfield and north of Fresno is almost done. The civil construction portion is almost done. They're ready to put the rails in the next couple of years and the electrification and build the maintenance base in the Fresno area. And then you could begin testing trains in that area. The portion from Fresno to Merced and from the south end of the line through Bakersfield is going to be started in the next couple of years. The environmental work is certified and the engineering is being completed. And when that's done, you'll have 170 miles between 3 of the fastest growing cities in America, Merced, Fresno, and Bakersfield, in the area with the worst air pollution in America, in our Central Valley. And it's a wonderful place to test the high-speed train programs and to begin providing some relief and employment too. Then the next extension is supposed to come from Chowchilla, just north of Fresno, through under the Pacheco Pass and tunnels, 4 tunnels, one of them 15 miles long, coming out at Gilroy, joining the Caltrain system, and the high-speed rail system uses the Caltrain system, which is being electrified now. No changes. They just use that system to go right on up into San Francisco. So it's on the way. It's the test bed high-speed rail system for America. And consequently, the oil companies are fighting it tooth and nail all the way through, and including buying up media so that they can fight it through the media. Now we have to fight back by saying, if the rest of the world can afford it, we can afford it. And by the way, ours is one of the less expensive systems in the world. The system between London and Birmingham is costing about 6 times as much per mile as our system is costing, but they're going right ahead and building it because they know they have to. Next, please. Next question, please. Or Paul, did I cover yours properly?
That wasn't my, that was Murad's question, but yes. And then I think Lene had a question, right?
Okay.
I did. I just your thought on what you feel happens to the developing countries where our products are mined to make all these wonderful batteries for these electric cars, because the majority of consumers are in bigger countries, and it's the developing countries that pay a price for the mining that can cause a lot of damage. So just wondering what your thought was on that and any improvements that are going on to help rectify that situation.
Lena, you're absolutely right. And it's a problem. Although there's a mine in the South Sierra that is also looking for these so-called, what do you call them? Rare earth minerals that you have to have for the batteries. Now you don't need much. It's a tiny, tiny amount for each battery, but it's lithium primarily. And so we're generating those now in an environment that had to go through an environmental impact report. So they're going to be capturing the pollutants and keeping them in a desert valley back in the Sierra. And if the other countries are doing it the same way, it won't hurt anybody and it won't hurt the environment. I know China is not, although they're trying to do a better job. And but one of the things you have to remember is that the battery technology is moving very rapidly. Now you're using less than half of the volume that you were 15 years ago to create the same kind of storage capacity. And longer lived batteries. I think the Tesla owner is a wacko. Musk is probably a genius, but he comes across as a nut. But he has done wonderful things for the world by the technology forcing that he's done in creating the new battery capacities and his electric cars. So much so that both my wife and I have little inexpensive Tesla. Now that's an oxymoron, isn't it? Inexpensive Tesla. But we have the little Model 3 Teslas, and they're the best cars we've ever driven. 350-mile range and as quick as a cat. And so they're working. And then those batteries are now, when they have to be recycled, they're going through a re-refining process, and the components that aren't used up are re-refined and put back into new batteries, and the waste is relatively minor. So we're figuring it out, but there's no alternative without them. Sonia, did you have a question?
I was just like back high-speed railways. Why is so expensive in like the US to build them?
Well, it's expensive because we're building it through a built area. We have the Central Valley area. We're having to go through 11 cities in order to bring it up from Bakersfield to Merced. And when you go through each one of those cities, you're going through very expensive land, and you're having to build infrastructure that's expensive. They don't want you to just build it on the ground. They want you to elevate it or put it in a tunnel through their cities so it doesn't disrupt their cities, even though they already have a rail line through the middle of their cities. So what's happening is that the high-speed rail program is setting up big trenches or tunnels or elevated structures that will not only take the high-speed rail line, but also the current freight rail line and take it out of those cities. So the cities are going to be a lot better off after the project is done, but the cost of the project is high. Now, that's the cost of high-speed rail, though. You can do it inexpensively if you're building it in a desert in Morocco. And by the way, they are building a high-speed rail line. But if you're building it in a much more densely populated area, then it's going to cost more money. But that's the area where you really need it. So let's do it. It's only going to cost more tomorrow. Yeah, let's put it another way. California is the richest state in the richest country that the world has ever known. We're 340 million people with a gross national project that is almost 3 times as high as China's. And China's gross national project comes from 1.4 billion people. You can't tell me if China can afford 12,000 kilometers of high-speed rail in 30 years, that the United States can't afford to build high-speed rail. We can afford to if we want to, if we're good citizens of the world and want to eliminate the effluent of those 30 million cars every morning. Now, we've got to be good citizens of the world, and we can afford it. Next, please. Thanks, Sonia.
Thanks, sir.
I see you're in a car.
I am actually.
I'm not going to ask whether it's petroleum powered.
She's running her veterinarian business. And so she
Oh, wonderful. I'm glad you took time to be
got
with us.
to come see the meeting.
I know.
So,
But yeah.
Rod, so I had a question. So the Rotary, as it relates, and we got to wrap up the meeting really quickly here. We're past, but
Okay.
this can be the last question. Rotary has this new 7th Avenue of service. And so in a nutshell, how are Rotarians, how are we going to make it different? You explained what we can do individually, but in a Rotary sense, is there anything that we can do as Rotarians? Because now it's the 7th Avenue of service. What do we do?
Paul, thanks for reminding me to come back to that. This began to bubble up in Rotary about 10 years ago. And the more conservative Rotary clubs, Rotary used to be very conservative, just killed it. They wouldn't listen to it. It was just something that they weren't going to accept. Gradually, though, local clubs began doing it anyway. And then about 5 years ago, the Rotary International president decided that he understood what was going on, and he demanded Rotary International begin looking at this. And as a result, a group was created called ESRAG, Environmental Sustainability Rotary Action Group, that was a parallel group to Rotary, sponsored by Rotary. And we have a chapter for the West Coast of America. The director is out of Monterey, a former district governor in Rotary, and his name is Yavuz Attila. And then 2 years ago, Rotary International finally broke through after people like you and I were talking to other people like you and I in Rotary all over the place, finally broke through, and Rotary International adopted the 7th Avenue of service. That was formally finally adopted after all the public reviews at the end of last year. And that 7th Avenue of service is called sustainability. And in the specifications for it, climate change is identified as one of those areas where we need to concentrate. And what that means is that Rotary International will fund grants that come from local Rotary clubs that go to Rotary International, goes through your district, 5170. Greg Giussiana, by the way, our district governor, is very supportive. And if you submit grants for Rotary projects that address climate change and sustainability, they'll fund those grants, and you'll be able to have projects that come from international funding. And so if you want to have more background on that, the ESRAG webpage will guide you through how to do that. And so Rotary is in this fight, just as they were in the fight for protecting the world against polio. They realize now that an even more serious threat than polio is climate change. And that's spreading now throughout the United States. In the last month, I've given speeches like this to the El Paso, Texas Rotary Club, to the Boise, Idaho Rotary Club. In fact, the whole District 10, 5188080 up in the Northwest, Mount Shasta Rotary Club, and so on. And then all sorts of Rotary Club in the Bay Area to let them know what they can do and how we can get this job done. And many of those are now creating their local Rotary Climate Action Committees. And if you want to do that, we'll send you all the background material and the guide discussion on how to get your local Climate Action Committee created. And you don't have to, you can do projects like tree planting and those kinds of things. Those are important. But the primary thing is to make it personal so that you begin to do things that are personal and good examples to other people. I've talked too much. Let me end my comment with just this thought, please, Paul. 10 or 15 years from now, if we don't make it, those beautiful children that are your grandchildren now are going to be young adults. And they're going to come to you and they're going to look you in the eye as they realize that their life expectancy is pretty short and that the world is falling down around them. And they're going to look you in the eye and they're going to say, Mama, Papa, when you had the chance to fight climate change, did you do all you could possibly do? Well, I'm going to have tears in my eyes too. And I'm going to look back at them and I'm going to say, yes, I fought as hard as I could. What will you say?
All right, thank you, Rod.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for allowing me to be with you.
Yeah, no, we appreciate that you're willing to talk to we're a smaller club, and I know that you typically have large audiences. So I mean, we appreciate the opportunity. If anybody in the club is interested, what got this started is I always complain about how many emails we get. I was giving Rod a hard time about how many emails I was getting, and then I said, but you're welcome to come talk to us if you want to come talk to us. And he said he would be happy to come talk to us. And so if there's anybody in the club that's interested in being involved with the 7th Avenue service, Rod is organizing something that we can get you on in a group with him and emails so that you're aware of what's going on and different things. I think there's a lot of different ways that I think it'd be interesting to have a meeting where we just discuss ways that we can decrease our impact on the environment just individually. I mean, that's an interesting thing. It's about saving money too. So I really appreciate you coming to talk to us, Rod. We're past time, but quite a bit. I'm going to ring the bell, and that will be the official end of our meeting. And Rod, I've recorded this. I'm going to send this out to you by YouTube, as well as everyone else that's been on the Zoom call. And we appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. And when you designate someone to be your liaison, to be on the district's Rotary Climate Action Council, and then I'll remove your name so that I don't pester you so much, and we'll put that other name on there to be the conduit.
That's fair enough.
All right. Thank you again.
Hey, Paul, hang on for a minute. There's a new member who's joining us.
Oh,
Hi,
hi, Rick.
Hi.
Hi, Rick.
sorry I'm late.
That's okay. I hope you're feeling better.
Yes, my wife is getting the medicine, so I'm waiting in the parking lot. So I thought I might as well join you now. But
Oh,
I'm
that's
sorry.
fantastic. Good to see you in person.
Yeah,
Paul,
absolutely.
he's the dentist gentleman who was introduced by Indonesia.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Hi.
Welcome, Rick.
Thank you,
Hi, Rick.
Paul.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll follow Rick. Gita, you have Rick's email, of course, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Everybody.
Thank you
Feel
again.
better soon.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Hey.